Y'all check this out. I was going to show y'all something. The Georgia Bulldogs, your 2024 SEC football champions. That looks pretty nice, doesn't it? Well, you're watching The Life of Dustin and Allison. This is mine and my wife's YouTube channel, and today we're doing a breakdown on the Georgia versus Notre Dame game. Georgia and Notre Dame are going to face off in the Sugar Bowl in the quarterfinals of the college football playoffs. And today's just going to be a short little breakdown and prediction video on what I think the final score is going to be, what I think how I think the game's going to go. If this is your first video you're ever seeing, subscribe to our channel. This is mine and my wife's YouTube channel. It's called The Life of Dustin and Allison. I do football videos all the time. I do prediction videos like these all the time. Me and my wife do little vlogs. We have plenty of short reels we do and all types of different stuff we do. We do long vlogs that are 2 hours long sometimes. And I also post videos on my faith and my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So you'll find something on our channel that you like. But today is a prediction video and a breakdown of the Georgia versus Notre Dame game here in Georgia's playoff game. I'm a diehard Georgia fan, but I'm a diehard college football fan. I watch all of it. I'll watch Georgia versus Alabama just as fast as I'll watch Miami, Ohio versus Louisville or something random like that. We're excited about these playoffs. It's been a while since we've been able to see Georgia take the field. It's going to end up being, by the time they play at 8:45 at night on New Year's Day, it's going to end up being 25 days since Georgia's victory in the SEC championship versus the Texas Longhorns, the second time Georgia beat Texas this year. And I always give a final score prediction, what I think the final score is going to be at the end of the video. So y'all stay tuned until then. I'll try to make it fast as possible. You're going to enjoy it. Like I said, do us a favor and hit the subscribe button and tap the bell for all, so you'll be notified of all new videos we post. So today, I wish I had my shelves back here like a little lower. That way you can see like some of the championship hats and just have something to look at besides a blank gray wall here. But that'll be okay. So Notre Dame is going to play Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Georgia has had a first round bye. They were seeded number 2. And Notre Dame had to play in the first round versus Indiana. A team that is, yes, only had one loss on the season, but had really played a literal garbage schedule. They literally had played no one. And they had looked good playing no one, but we've seen in round 1 of the playoffs what Indiana was as Notre Dame really beat them easily. It was ugly. The final score was 27-17, which I did nail dead on the head. I do score predictions on all the games I put on Facebook, and I did predict 27-17 and hit it dead on the head. A score prediction is just a general idea of how you think the game is going to go. And even if you nail it dead on the head, it was just luck. But it was pretty cool that it ended up being exactly what I said. I've hit a couple of score predictions dead on the head this year. But really, if you watch that game, 27-17 was not the it didn't really tell the story of how that game went. Notre Dame pretty much destroyed Indiana. And Indiana scored a couple of times late, got an onside kick, I believe, and scored again to make it look a lot closer than it was. It was basically like 27-3 there towards the end of that game. It wasn't even close. So I've got a couple notes here, but the general thing that I've been hearing from everybody around and everything that I watch is that this is going to be a hard-fought, physical football game. This is going to be a trench war, and Notre Dame and Georgia are just about to really beat on each other, and it's going to be a low-scoring defensive football game. Both teams are going to try to run the ball, and it's just going to be one of those games where it's 7-7 at halftime, and the final score is going to be something like 17-14, and just a low-scoring, hard-fought, physical football game. And that seems to be what I'm hearing from everybody, as they have Georgia as a 2.5-point favorite And yes, I guess I'll have to say that I think Notre Dame has looked really physical, and I do agree that Notre Dame has a very solid defense. I think in the entire landscape of college football, I would say that Notre Dame does have probably a top 10, at least a top 12 to 15 defense. They do have a good, solid, hard playing defense. Um, and, I see all this stuff about, Notre Dame leads this stat and this stat in the defensive categories. And they have looked very physical. But at the same time, you have to look at who the teams have played. Who has Notre Dame looked very physical against? And I know we can always sit here and do this whole thing of, well, they've played them and A played B and C beat A, so that means that when B plays D, I know transitive properties are hard to get into with college football, but I mean, at the end of the day, when you go and you look through a 12 team, well, Notre Dame has played 13 games because they played their 12 regular season games, and Indiana in the playoffs, and Georgia has also played 13 games with their 12 game regular season and the SEC championship game. And when you look at a 13 game sample size of who Notre Dame has played and who Georgia has played, and look at what the two teams have done, Notre Dame has looked very physical, but they have looked very physical against very, very subpar competition. And I know Notre Dame beat Texas A&M at the beginning of the year. That was an impressive win. They looked very physical in that game. But I don't know if it's just going to be this. What I'm telling you is, everybody's thinking that this is going to be a physical game, and it is going to be a physical game to an extent, but is Notre Dame going to be able to be just as physical as Georgia? I don't know. Georgia plays. I can assure you this: the most physical team that Georgia plays all year is every week in practice when they play Georgia. When they go against each other in practice, you're not gonna play a more physical team that enjoys playing hard and that enjoys hitting hard, playing solid defense, solid lines of scrimmage, that likes to come off the ball and hit you in your face mask and get you off the ball and move humans around with other large human beings. When you got a team in Georgia that loves to play that way, and they recruit inside the top two every single year since Kirby Smart has been there, I mean, you're not going to get bigger, more physical, longer athletes than you do at Georgia. And I know that Notre Dame and Georgia have a very similar play style. Both teams run a pro style offense where we like to we don't play spread. We don't send 5 wide receivers wide and run air raid, or we don't run our whole offense isn't based off just 75% RPO. They play very much like NFL teams these days, and I know even NFL teams are shifting to a lot of RPO and things. But Georgia and Notre Dame like to line up in a traditional pro style formation. Sometimes 1 tight end, sometimes 2 tight ends, sometimes they'll bring in a condensed formation, and usually an X receiver and a Z receiver, and every now and then add in a slot receiver. But Georgia and Notre Dame try to establish a run game, and then they build their offense off of that run game. You try to get the run game going, try to be physical on the offensive line, move the other team out of the way, create space, create holes, and then when you start to have success running the ball, then we start incorporating play action and RPO off of that. And now Georgia will also be a completely different animal, and nobody really knows what to expect. With Gunnar Stockton coming in for Carson Beck. Carson Beck's having season-ending elbow surgery. And it may end up being a good thing for Georgia. It may end up being a bad thing for Georgia. Or it might, our offense is liable to come out and Gunnar Stockton is liable to take off. Because he's definitely a run threat like Carson wasn't in any way. I believe Carson could throw the ball a little better than Gunnar. And but there's no doubt that Carson wasn't very mobile. There was a couple times this year he took off and ran for a first down, but it wasn't very athletic. And there's no doubt that Gunnar Stockton is an athlete. And he reminds me of Stetson Bennett. I've been telling everybody this whole time that Gunnar Stockton is just a muscular Stetson Bennett. And believe you me, you don't want to come up and tackle this guy. This guy's 6'1" or 6'2". He's right over 6 foot tall, and he's 220 pounds. He's stout, and he's physical, and he's what you would call a football player. Okay, I stood by and defended Carson Beck more than anybody. because in this new world that we live in, a transfer portal and everybody taking off and abandoning their team as soon as they realize they're not starting, and as soon as they don't get their way, they take off and head to another team. Carson Beck did not do that. He stayed at Georgia, and you got to take your hat off and give him props for that. He stayed at Georgia, and I'm not just talking about he came back last year to get $1 million in a Lamborghini. I'm not talking about that. He stayed at Georgia for 3 years. He rode the bench for 3 years, and sat in line, and he was third string when he got here, and moved up to second string, behind JT Daniels and Stetson Bennett, and eventually worked his way into a starter. Had a wonderful 2023 season, especially with Brock Bowers and Alad McConkey on the team. And he had there was big expectations for Carson coming into the 2024 season. He was like on the Heisman Trophy list, and everybody thought he was about to go off and have an amazing year. And he had a less than stellar year, I'll say. But at the same time, to his credit, and who hasn't had injuries? People get injured in football. That's how it is. But Georgia's offensive line was a merry-go-round all year long. We had running backs hurt all year long. We've had an issue at receiver with drop passes. We've had an issue at receiver with running the wrong routes. It's easy to watch the football game, and all you see is the quarterback drop back with the ball and throw it, and the defense intercept it. And you say, oh, well, our quarterback sucks. Let's just bring in the backup. You can always tell low IQ fans when their initial response to figuring out the problem is to fire the offensive coordinator and bring in the backup quarterback. Like, guys, these guys make millions of dollars a year to coach football. These guys have forgotten. Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo and Glenn Schumann and this Georgia coaching staff and Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, these guys have forgotten more about football than we will ever know. And if the answer was just as simple as bringing in the backup quarterback, then they would have already done that by now. But regardless, Carson got hurt in the SEC championship game. He's out for the season, and we bring Gunner in. And in the first drive that we had against Texas after halftime, Gunner looked amazing. And I don't know how much of that was Texas completely being unprepared for Gunner Stockton and being all in for Carson Beck, or how much of that was that Gunner. I think it's a little bit of both. I think that Texas was unprepared for it. And Gunner came in, I was worried about him being nervous for the game, the moment being too big for him. But he came in and just took over, especially in that first drive. Now after the first drive, when Texas made adjustments, he had a couple of boneheaded plays, threw an interception where we didn't even have the receiver on that side of the field. I believe he was trying to throw the ball away, but still, you got to get it. You got to get it. If you're trying to throw it away, you got to get it thrown away. And then he had the fumble that thankfully went out of bounds. And there was a couple of just ugly plays, but again, this is with 5 minutes to prepare at halftime. I mean, I listened to a guy, Rusty Manziel. I mean, he said Mike Bobo literally sat down with Gunner at halftime and said, hey, what plays do you like on first down? What plays do you like on second down? What plays do you like on third down? And they literally put together that drive in 5 or 10 minutes at halftime. And now Georgia has 24 days to prepare and to get him ready. And this guy is not scared to play football, okay? This is, like I said, this is Stetson Bennett with muscles, okay? In his mind, he's the best player on the football field, and he will not be denied. He's not scared to lower his shoulder. He's not scared to run the football. He's not scared to throw the football. He will, and a lot of people are, are not giving him enough credit. Some people are giving Gunner too much credit. We really don't know what we're gonna see out of Gunner. We really don't know in a full game sample size of just what we're gonna get. Now, I'm feeling very confident about it because Gunner Stockton was a top 10 quarterback when Georgia recruited him. Okay, this isn't, even though he has that Stetson Bennett mentality, this wasn't a guy that couldn't make it on the roster and went to JUCO and then came back and then miraculously got the starting time. This is a guy who was a borderline 5-star quarterback. I believe some recruiting services had Gunner as a 5-star quarterback, regardless a high 4-star, and he set Georgia State records passing and running the ball. I believe Gunner Stockton broke Trevor Lawrence's State of Georgia total passing yards record. I don't know if it was a single season or total career, but this guy, he can sling the ball. Now, I've seen plenty of highlight videos of him and stuff. People that I go to church with showing me highlight videos of him. But at the same time, that is high school football, and now this is college football. This isn't Rabun County. This is the Texas Longhorns, and we're going to see how he can do. I think nobody knows. We haven't had a chance to see Gunner throw the ball much in any games But there's no doubt that this is going to be a little bit of a different animal going up against this Georgia team. I don't know what Notre Dame is going to really prepare for. Now the defense is going to have to not only worry about the running backs, but the quarterback will also pull the ball and will take off running with it and is dangerous with his legs. And he can also sling it. So it's going to be kind of a triple threat here. And to be honest with you, I don't really know. I don't really know how good that's going to work out for Notre Dame. Coming in and preparing for a Georgia team that's already has one of the top 2 or 3 rosters in all of the sport. And they're already hard to beat. I mean, Georgia, you've seen this year, Georgia's almost impossible to beat when they're playing bad. So when you come in and they're going to be playing with their hair on fire in a playoff game, and they're going to be hard to prepare for because you don't know really what we're going to get out of Gunnar Stockton. And everybody around him knows that they also have to step up their level of play now. It's going to be a hard feat for Notre Dame to beat Georgia. I'm not saying it can't happen. But it's going to be everything but impossible, in my opinion. So I wanted to go through. I know I went off on a long tangent there about quarterbacks. I'm feeling pretty good about Gunnar. I think he's a football player. I think he's gonna really grab the bull by the horns and gonna try to take this team and win a championship. He's waited his turn. He's been hungry. He wasn't scared when they put him in the position. If Gunnar Stockton wasn't too nervous for being put into an SEC championship game. The moment's not going to be too big for him playing against Notre Dame here or any other team in the playoffs. If we go on to play Boise State or Penn State in the next round, if we beat Notre Dame, it's not going to be too big for him. And I think once those coaches, this is the main thing with me with Gunnar Stockton. He came into that game being Superman. He came into the game being Stetson Bennett. I'm going to put this team on my shoulders and I'm going to win this game. I think when you get the Georgia Bulldogs and the whole team in general. When you take the most talented roster in football, top 2 or 3, and you have the best coaching staff in football, and they've already played the hardest schedule in the country. Georgia played the number 1 hardest schedule in the country. They went 11-2 and won the SEC championship with a bunch of injuries, with offensive line rotation, with guys being out, and everybody has injuries. But when you take that team who has been battle-tested, they've been into overtime twice this year. They went into 8 overtimes with Georgia Tech. They went into 2 or 3 overtimes with Texas. And they've been on the road at Alabama, on the road at Texas, on the road at Ole Miss, on the road at Kentucky. They've played home games against Auburn, Tennessee, Mississippi State. They've played Georgia Tech, who is not your granddaddy's Georgia Tech. They have played Clemson and Florida. And they have been battle-tested, battle-hardened, and they make it all the way and win the SEC championship game. And then you give them 25 days off to get healthy. It's a dangerous spot. It's a dangerous spot to be in. You let this Georgia team and Kirby Smart get their feet up under him and get some guys back healthy and get a game plan together with Gunnar Stockton. It would have been one thing if Carson Beck would have got hurt in the middle of the season and Georgia was having to go on the road at Texas next week. But it's another thing when Gunnar comes in and plays the whole second half and then Georgia has 25 days off until their next game. I think we're going to be in a good spot here. I think once these coaches get Gunnar in the system and for 25 days, for 3.5 weeks, are able to get a game plan together and to see what plays he likes to run and get a good RPO game going, figure out a way to get the tight ends involved, try to get the receivers on the same page and get a good screen game going. I know a lot of people make fun of Mike Bobo for loving wide receiver screens. I mean, every time they run it, they gain 4 or 5 yards. I know they like to do a lot of end around stuff where they bring a receiver around and pitch him the ball. It's going to be a dangerous thing. The reason Georgia's going to be so good going forward, and the reason they have been so good going forward, is they're not one-dimensional. Georgia has an array of weapons to beat you. I mean, they play solid defense. They got a solid front seven. They got good, long, tall, fast, physical secondary players. These I've heard of coaches. I heard when TCU went to play Georgia in the national championship game in 2022. Some of the players were thinking, man, Georgia's got some good-looking linebackers. Those guys are real big and physical. And they said, guys, that's their secondary players. That's their cornerbacks and safeties. That's not the linebackers. And Georgia just we have a physical offensive line. We try to run the ball, and now it's going to be another threat with, you got to worry about Gunnar Stockton pulling the ball and taking off with it, and we just have an array of weapons we use, and it's going to be hard to stop, hard to defend. You can't stop everything, and we're going to try to learn a little bit of everything. But going back to this idea that this is going to be a hard-fought physical football game, Notre Dame has looked physical, but let's go down the list. I've got every team in order of who Notre Dame played this season and every team that Georgia played this season. Notre Dame has played Texas A&M. It's a very physical game, very, very, very solid SEC football team. First-year coach Mike Elko. Notre Dame won that game. They've played Northern Illinois, who they lost to at home. Purdue, Miami, Ohio, Louisville, Stanford, Georgia Tech. They played Georgia Tech's backup quarterback. Navy, Florida State. I believe Florida State won 2 football games. Virginia, Army. Army was a top 25. Army was a top 25 win. Dustin, what are you talking about? Come on, man. Army. USC. USC is barely bowl eligible this year. They were hot garbage. And Indiana in the playoffs. That's not exactly what you would call a murderer's row. That is an absolute. That's an absolute garbage. That's an absolute garbage football schedule. And Notre Dame, you know, they are what they are, and they've had a good season, and they're in the playoffs. What else can you ask for? But I haven't seen anything. I don't know what everybody's watching. I don't understand why they only have Georgia as a 2.5. Currently, Georgia is a 2.5 point favorite, and it went back and forth between Notre Dame being favored by 1 and Georgia being favored by 1. And I really, for the life of me, I can't understand what everybody's watching this year. I don't understand how you see Notre Dame play who they've played and see Georgia play who they've played. And yes, Georgia lost to Alabama and Ole Miss, and yes, Georgia went into overtime with Georgia Tech, but that's not where it stops. Georgia also beat the Texas Longhorns, who has possibly top 2 or 3 front 7 in all of college football. I mean, the best defensive line you're ever going to face, best linebackers, the best defense you're ever going to face in this sport. Beat them in their house. They went down there and skull drugged them, beat the brake drums off of them. If it wasn't for the terrible officiating, and referees taking calls back and changing them like has never been done in history, Georgia would have literally beaten Texas 38-7. But they still ended up beating them by 15 points at home in Austin, and then beat them again in the SEC championship game. Georgia also, beat Tennessee by 2 touchdowns, which was a hard physical game. I mean, it doesn't just stop at, Georgia went into overtime with Georgia Tech. Yeah, well, they also beat Clemson like 34-3 or 34-6 or something like that. I mean, Georgia has played some physical football teams with big old front 7s and big lines of scrimmage, and absolutely had their way with them. I can guarantee you Georgia's not going to be scared or concerned about coming in here and being out physicaled by a Notre Dame team who has been playing Northern Illinois, Purdue, and Virginia, and Miami of Ohio. So on the flip side, let's see who Georgia has played this year. Clemson, Tennessee Tech, Kentucky, Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, Texas, Florida, Ole Miss. I believe Ole Miss might have the best front 7 in all of football, that transfer portal they brought in last year. Tennessee, UMass, Georgia Tech, and Texas again in the SEC championship game. I'm going to tell you something about these teams that come in to play Georgia. They literally make it their life mission to beat Georgia. I mean, when you have a team like Georgia, this is how Alabama used to be back when they were good. When you have a team like Georgia who's won multiple national championships and has been the dominant factor in the sport for the last 3, 4, 5 years, they've been the mountaintop. Like if you want to win the championship, you're going to have to come through the team in red and black. What it does is it puts a giant bullseye on your back, and these teams, especially big rivals like Georgia Tech and Tennessee and they basically, it seemed to me when Alabama blew the doors off Georgia in the first half of that football game and Georgia came back on them and took the lead, Alabama ended up winning. But then Alabama went on to play a terrible rest of the season. Almost lost to South Carolina, lost to Vanderbilt, Ole Miss. It seemed to me that Alabama had prepared the entire offseason for Georgia. It seemed like they said, we're just going to try to figure out a way to beat Georgia, and we'll just let everything else fall into place. Georgia Tech, I can assure you, cannot stand Georgia, and they have been preparing for Georgia for probably 3 or 4 weeks, making it their life mission to beat Georgia, and they played a phenomenal game. Teams like Ole Miss, after Ole Miss, and they handed it to Georgia. Georgia went down there and got the break. Ole Miss beat the brake drums off Georgia that day. But after the game, Lane Kiffin said in the post-game press conference, we literally, after we went to Athens last year and Georgia beat us 52-17, we decided inside of our program. Lane Kiffin said this. Go back and watch the interview. I mean, he didn't elaborate on it like I'm saying, but he literally said, we went back and said, we've got to figure out a way to do whatever we have to do. Transfer portal, recruiting, I don't care what we have to do. We're going to build a line of scrimmage. We're going to build a defensive front seven that can beat Georgia. And they spent the entire offseason trying to come up with a way to be physical enough to beat Georgia. I mean, that was Ole Miss's most dominant game all season. And you know, I just teams are out to get them. I mean, literally, I'm not saying this just because I'm a Georgia fan. They get everybody's best shot. I mean, they got Ole Miss's best shot. They got Georgia Tech's best shot. They got Alabama's best shot. They're going to get Tennessee's best shot every year, and that's just how it is. Like when you're the top, everybody's gunning for you. Everybody wants to take down the king, and they get everybody's best shot, and that's why you get into games like that. And guys, when you go and you play on the road at Alabama, on the road at Texas, on the road at Ole Miss, on the road at Kentucky, and you play Clemson, Florida, Texas twice, when you play Auburn and Tennessee and Mississippi State and Georgia Tech, who is really good, a really good triple threat football team, you're just not going to win every game, and you're not gonna go into every game and be so dominant. Everybody's saying, well, this ain't nothing like the 2021 and the 2022 Georgia Bulldogs. This just ain't the same team. Well, guys, the transfer portal has evened out all these teams, and not only that, the schedules have gotten twice as hard with Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC and divisions going away. But I'm just saying that what Notre Dame has played this year and what Georgia has played this year is not even comparable. It's not even comparable. And I do just believe that this game is going to be a shock factor for Notre Dame. I believe they're going to come into this game and they're not going to know what they just ran into. They have gotten used to playing teams like Indiana, USC, Army, Virginia, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Miami of Ohio, Purdue, Northern Illinois. I mean, I'm literally reading off the schedule right now. While Georgia has been going into overtime and having to win games in a multitude of ways against Clemson, Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Georgia Tech. I mean, it's insane, and I really think that this is going to be overwhelming for Notre Dame. I think they're gonna face a team that they haven't seen all year. I told my dad last night, I said, I know this might be a bad example because it's the NFL, but imagine an NFL team, just say that, I'm saying this is Notre Dame. Imagine an NFL team playing the Carolina Panthers for 12 weeks straight, or playing the New Orleans Saints for 12 weeks straight, and then they have to go play in a playoff game the Kansas City Chiefs. You know what I mean? I mean, that's kind of what we're dealing with here on a much smaller level. But a couple of notes I had, and then I'm going to end the video and give you my final score prediction. This video's got 28 minutes long. I'm sorry. If you've made it to here, please subscribe. It's going to be hard for Notre Dame to prepare for Georgia with Gunnar Stockton. We've already talked about that. He's going to be hard to prepare for. He's going to be hard to stop. You got to worry about the backs and the quarterback now. And I know one thing I told my dad yesterday, Mike Bobo likes to slip in every now and then in these games. He likes to slip in where we will fake it to the back, the quarterback will have it, and then we will send a receiver around in orbit motion or just in motion in general and toss it to the receiver and let him just kind of run an end around. That's going to be dangerous, especially if Georgia is able to get a run game going and then also starts to run our backs and then also starts to get Gunnar Stockton breaking free for 3 or 4 first downs, running for 12 to 13 yards at a time. And then Gunnar keeps the ball, looks like he's going to run it again, and the entire defense has got their eyes locked on Gunnar, and he just flips the ball to Arian Smith, who is the fast, if he catches it, is the fastest player in the SEC, and he will be gone or at least run for a big gain. UGA, I think that Georgia's going to have a lot of success running the ball here in this game. Notre Dame has got a solid defense, and Georgia has a solid defense. It's going to be a low scoring game. It's not going to get into the 30s. But I just think that Notre Dame has gotten so used to playing these lower level teams when they come up against this Georgia offensive line, who has had a chance to get healthy. I believe Georgia's going to be able to move them out of the way a little bit and just out physical them and be able to run the ball really well with our backs and with Gunner. Kind of touched on this already. Georgia has had a chance to get healthy. We've got all of our defensive linemen back. We've got our whole offensive line back, which we hadn't had all year. We've got all of our running backs, pretty much all of our running backs healthy. And we're a healthy team coming into this game. And like I said, you give Georgia 25 days to prepare and time to get healthy, and it's a dangerous spot. I believe that what Georgia's going to do here, I believe that they're going to force Riley Leonard to throw the ball. I think that Georgia's going to, I'm not necessarily saying they're going to flood the box, but I think they're going to bring a lot of guys to the line of scrimmage, close to the line of scrimmage as possible. We're going to fill the box. We're going to put our corners out on an island and make them defend in We're going to make our corners defend in man coverage, and we're not going to allow Notre Dame to run the ball. They're not going to run the ball on us. Georgia is going to stop the run entirely and completely. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Notre Dame had. I would be surprised if Notre Dame had more than 60, 70 yards rushing in this game. Georgia's going to hold them to under 50 yards rushing, and we're just gonna put pressure on Riley Leonard and try to force him to get the ball out. We're gonna stop the run game. We're gonna come up with all these exotic stunts and different packages and blitzes to get after the quarterback and force Riley Leonard to throw the ball while he's under duress. And I just don't know how well it's going to work out for Notre Dame. I don't see Notre Dame being able to score here. They may when you play like that, when you decide to stop the run and kind of come after the quarterback and put the pressure on him, you're going to give up a couple shots. I can see Notre Dame hitting a couple of 20, 30-yard passes 3 or 4 times and scoring a touchdown and maybe even scoring multiple touchdowns, maybe once or twice. I don't see Notre Dame scoring more than 17 points in this game. I just don't. They're going to have a hard time scoring or moving the ball in general at all on Georgia. I see Notre Dame going a lot of 3-and-outs. But vice versa, Notre Dame does have a solid defense, and it's also going to be hard for Georgia to move the ball. But I do believe that we're eventually going to be able to get a run game going. I believe that Notre Dame's going to do everything they can to stop the run, and we may be able to sneak some tight ends out, on some little shallow routes or some quick slants with our wide receivers and get a shorter passing game going, because Notre Dame will be also trying to come after us. It's going to really hurt Notre Dame losing that big-time defensive tackle they got. I don't know if he's a defensive tackle or a defensive end, actually. But he was like the team leader in tackles for loss and sacks. He was a big-time football player. Just a football player, man. It's going to really hurt them to lose him. And I think that Georgia can get into the low to mid-20s, and I think Notre Dame can get into the low teens. I think that's about how it's going to be. Somewhere around 24-13, somewhere around 28-14, 23-10, something like that. And I'm about to give my final score prediction. I've went through all my notes. I can't really think of anything else I had to add to that. I think that this game is going to be a blowout. And when I say a blowout, I don't mean I think Georgia's going to win 38-10. I don't think that Georgia's going to win 35-7. I don't mean a blowout like that. What I mean is I think that it's going to be entirely obvious from the minute that they kick that ball off until the minute that the final clock hits 0, that it's just obvious that Georgia is the far and above better, more physical football team. Notre Dame is well coached. They're very disciplined. They're not going to beat themselves. They're not going to make a bunch of mistakes and have a bunch of penalties. But I think Georgia's just going to line up and out football Notre Dame. I don't think Notre Dame can football with Georgia. I just don't. We're gonna line up. We're gonna snap the ball. We're gonna come off the ball and hit you in your face mask. We're gonna push you around. And I just think that it's going to be obvious that Georgia's the better team. I think it's going to be rather low scoring, not as low scoring as some people are saying. And I think that Georgia's leading by about 10 points going into the third quarter and scores again late to win by 3 scores. I think Georgia's going to win the game by 14 to 17 points. I guess that's all I got. Give me Georgia 27, Notre Dame 10. Hope y'all enjoyed this video. Y'all have a good day.